I've been writing about and investigating UFOs for well over 20 years, and most of that time I've been employed full time to do that work. I've written dozens of articles, I've been on many UFO programs, and I'm often interviewed by news outlets. Claims from credible witnesses of incredible things have inspired me to keep an open mind to the extraordinary possibilities when it comes to the nature of UFOs, often referred to as UAP when it comes to the scientific investigation. The goal of this podcast is to provide credible news and information to ground this cosmic conversation. Welcome to Open Minds UAP News. Hello and welcome to Open Minds UFO Radio, or Open Minds UAP Radio now. I am your host, Alejandro Rojas, and I have with me Jason McClellan. Hello, Jason.
Hey, Alejandro. Good to see you, buddy.
Just like the old days. For those of you who are new to the show, like some of the people who have joined because of Den of Geek, Jason and I started Open Minds UFO News, I think we called it at the time, in, what was it, 2011, probably? 2010?
Probably 2010, yeah.
Yeah, so quite some time ago. And then it was the weekly podcast. In fact, some of you subscribers, because it's the same podcast feed that we use today, probably heard those shows way back in the day. Although things were a lot more fun back then.
UFOs in general were a lot more fun, yes.
Yeah, back when, there was just when they weren't so popular in a mainstream thing, it was kind of like, we're flying under the radar. We're kind of this niche group where people are just exploring and talking and thinking about things and not as intense about everything as they are these days.
And the research community was a hell of a lot of fun. It was very cordial, everybody was excited to chip in and contribute and work together and hear different ideas and bounce ideas off of each other, not just fish for the answer they wanted to hear or push a certain agenda. People were very curious about finding the truth and working together to get there.
And you and I don't think people realize this, for 10 years or so or longer, we were writing articles every day, like an article every day, posting news articles every day. I mean, we were following all of this very closely, including the development up into, the 2017 kind of period.
Right. And, that's even wild for us to think back on and realize even to this day, we're probably a couple of the, a handful of people who ever have been paid full time to research and write about UFOs.
Exactly. I try to explain that to people and what a big deal it is. It's just because we live and breathe it. I mean,
right.
It's everything. Yeah. Paid full time. How many people can say that? I can't think of really practically anybody else.
Right. Yeah. Our buddy Lee Spiegel was one of the others in that elite group, I guess, if you want to call it elite. Unfortunate groups.
And this just came to mind, on the show. I try to do kind of like we did back in the day, full disclosure, everything's on the table. In fact, I just wrote an article that I posted on Open Minds today, which is only the second article I've done in the last 5-6 years on Open Minds.
Right.
But where I reveal kind of the behind the scenes with Bigelow and MUFON. But the end of Open Minds, I'm not saying that Tom DeLonge had anything to do with the demise of Open Minds, but at the end of Open Minds, we were working very closely. And in fact, you and Maureen, our colleague with Open Minds, were writing for him for a short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, toward the end of Open Minds. Yeah, to the Stars was just coming on the scene, and we were actually hired by Tom to write for To the Stars. So yeah, it all kinds of ties together.
Yeah, it's so funny how we were just all immersed in that. But the reason that I bring that up also is because, since then you've been doing, from what I understand, a lot of PR type of, or more communications and online kind of social media stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've Yeah, haven't ever been able to step away from the UFO field. I've definitely been very active in UFOs, and I still follow it every day, and I always have. UFOs is one of those things that I don't want to say it's like an infection, but you can't get rid of it. No matter how bad you want to get out of UFOs, sometimes you just can't. And we've invested so much time in this topic, and we love it. We really do. And I think you and I care about genuine research and actively looking for answers to this incredibly exciting mystery. So that's what keeps pulling me in. And I have done in my professional career lots of communications and marketing roles for both the public and private sector. I'm currently with NASA, but I've done a lot of these roles, but I have maintained my active following of UFO news. I've done a podcast. I put that on hiatus right now just because I don't have time with all my NASA duties. But something I do keep up is a weekly UFO newsletter. Because again, we're news geeks, and I love to follow it, and let people know, because we hear that tired refrain that, oh, the mainstream media doesn't report UFOs. That's not true, and that's never been true. Mainstream media outlets around the world report on UFOs every single day. So I like to highlight that, and so that's what I do with my weekly UFO newsletter.
Totally. And we'll get into some of the news from the last week that mainstream news has
Yeah.
been covering really soon here. But one of the reasons I wanted to go over all of this and cover this, and why I'm so excited to be talking to you, let alone that we had so much fun doing this in the past, is that, at the time that we started doing Open Minds, and it was kind of, Antonio Huneas was writing with us, and we all felt like we had to cover this in a legit news skeptical kind of perspective, just putting the facts out there, not making assumptions, what I think is a right way to do it. And that wasn't being done before. And I think that once we stopped doing it, besides some of the mainstream press that has picked it up here and there, that's not being done anymore.
I agree with you 100%. And we can talk about this more later. And I know you
Yeah.
and I have talked about it before, but I think there's a lot of indoctrination that happens when you get into the UFO topic and you start researching, reading the literature, hearing what some of the leading voices have to say. And one of the things that gets pushed very early on in your UFO research is that skepticism is a bad word. And to your point, I don't think you can responsibly cover the UFO topic or communicate about the UFO topic if you don't do it with responsible skepticism. That is required. That's what makes it journalistic. That's what makes it unbiased. That's what is required for a genuine pursuit of truth, wherever that leads.
Yeah, and I'm smiling because I'm really excited to get into the news, because we're gonna rip some people apart. I know for not adhering to this, but also, not just for the case sake of poo-pooing what they're doing, but to also demonstrate the problems when you don't do it correctly. And so we'll get into that. I'm really excited to get into the news here. So let's start taking a look. And just so people know, Jason doesn't know what I'm about to get into. So
No,
will
this
all be
is fun. This is
impromptu.
like a news roulette.
Yeah,
Should
exactly.
have some cool like vamp music.
All right, here we go. Let's begin with the National Archives. So this was kind of cool. About a week ago, last Thursday, the National Archives put out this press release, and it made a bunch of news that they had put a bunch of new stuff in the archives regarding UAP or UFOs. And I guess I'll just continue to use both terms. What term do you mostly use these days?
I am Team UFO all the way.
Oh, you are? Cool. Okay, so we can stick to that mostly. I go back and forth depending on the topic, but
Sure.
UAP are UFOs. So, deal with it. Deal with it, National Archives. But as far as I know, there's nothing new in these. All of these files were essentially released prior, but just here and there. And now at least they're all in one place, which is
Right.
nice. Do you have any more information than that?
No, that's my understanding as well. And we see this a lot when different groups have decided to release UFO records or files. They're things that have been in the public before, but it's more of a reorganization effort, or just a kind of a moving into different folder sort of scenarios. And that's what we have here. This was congressionally mandated. So a lot of these files that have been out before are being moved to a central location. And hey, that's always a good thing.
Right. And one of some of the pictures, like a lot of articles are using this picture here or similar ones. They were from a guy named Paul Villa. And actually, this article is from 2016. And I posted it because I thought it was a really good article. This in the Daily Express. I think it was the best one that goes over the history of these pictures, but also demonstrating that there was research done and they were proven to be hoaxes. So a lot of people, of course, were getting excited by these incredible pictures that were in these articles. When I posted this, as you know, unfortunately, a lot of people didn't read the headlines, so they were debating, oh, those are hoaxes. I know they are.
Right.
That's what the article says. That's what the article
Right.
justifies. So it's a great article on that, but it's funny how that happens.
Yeah, people have short attention spans, and people don't like to read more than they have to. So that's always been the case. I mean, it's certainly gotten much worse than when you and I were doing this at Open Minds. We ran into that a lot. But yeah, people don't read beyond the headline.
I actually have something exciting to announce, and
Yeah,
this picture reminds me of that, which is you wrote what I think these pictures really remind me of the Billy Meyer
for
picture.
sure. Yeah,
And I think that you've written one of the best, most well-researched and unbiased kind of comprehensive articles on the Billy Meyer photos that is in the magazine. And I recently found all the magazine files and sent those to you and Maureen. I've kind of felt like, hey, that'd be great that if we had all the PDFs to all of the Open Minds magazines. And I've decided to post those. So we'll post all of those, and then coming week, in honor of you coming back to the show this week.
Well, that's exciting. Yeah, there is some fantastic content in those magazines.
Mm-hmm. But that was a great article. I think you did a really good job. Really, and what was fun, and maybe we could touch on this just a second too, since we're talking about it, is we would always try to write unbiased articles to put out there, all of the information on both sides of the debate. But it's really funny because that article had the same effect some of the other articles we wrote, where you just get heat from both sides, because one side is saying, oh, you're saying they're real, and the other side is saying, oh, you're not, you're debunking them, when really it's kind of good because that means you have a balanced article, but it's also kind of a bummer because you're just getting crap from both sides.
Yes, yes. That comes with journalism. I mean, that's to be expected. But also, Alejandro, that's UFOs. And yeah, sure. I mean, UFOs can be fun and sexy, but UFOs are really hard. They are. People want simple answers. UFOs don't have simple answers many times. And yeah, I mean, that needs to be emphasized. UFOs are hard.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. And you're working with NASA. The last show, NASA was kind of the hero of my little talk that I did, because I think NASA's analysis on UAP was very good, and I agree with their findings and their suggestions. They were very wise and on point. And that's what makes it. And really, it's that difficulty and the heat they got for just getting involved with the topic that scientists have been really turned off, including NASA. Why do they want to stick their neck out and get beaten up?
Right. Because you can't win. That's the
Yeah.
thing. I mean, love him or hate him, Sean Kirkpatrick, certainly was very visible with a lot of this, but it doesn't really matter who you are, how much you're willing to stick your neck out, or the level of involvement you want to have with this, and the level or quality of contribution you can make. It doesn't matter, because you're going to never hear the end of it from the UFO crowd, from the scientific crowd. you can't please everybody. You're not going to. And again, that contributes to what makes UFOs so hard. That's why so many people flee this field, and you can't keep good researchers continuing this work because it's a thankless work. And again, you can't make everybody happy, and that shouldn't be the focus of UFO research. You're not trying to please somebody, you're trying to find the truth. And no matter, what side you come out on, you're going to piss somebody off.
Another organization that I really love, and I'm really proud of because they stick to their guns, and to your point, they stick to the facts regardless of how the public's going to take them, has been PBS. And of course, I got to be part of the PBS Nova special, but they released
Oh, that's right.
an article just recently, and I know for a fact that Nova special, because it was science specific, got a lot of heat because producers had called me and said, is this normal? People are so upset. I'm like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it is normal, but I'm really proud of them because they're brave enough to still back it up and release this new video, which talks about how they debunk videos and talks about some of those Navy videos that have been debunked. It's a really good video. I recommend people watch.
Yeah, that's cool. I love seeing this. I love when mainstream outlets go out on the limb, and it's sad that it should be, or that it is a limb, but it is because of how awful people are. And but I do appreciate this. More of this needs to happen. And again, coming back to the word debunk.
Yes.
I know it sounds terrible, and don't get the wrong impression. Alejandro and I are not anti-UFO. We are very, very much pro-UFO in the sense that we both believe that UFOs exist. I've seen countless UFOs myself that I haven't been able to explain. So we're not poo-pooing UFOs here. What we are poo-pooing, I think, a lot is how a lot of UFO research is done. It's incredibly flawed. A lot of the suppositions and a lot of the talking points that people rely on are incredibly flawed because humans are incredibly flawed. So I think things like this need to be constantly put into or in front of people because there's a lot of education that needs to happen when it comes to UFOs. Because again, most UFOs are mundane objects. They're going to be something that is just outside of somebody's experience and, is later identified. That is almost all of UFOs. That's not saying that there aren't potentially extraterrestrial UFOs or something that, that's exotic or should be looked at, because that is certainly the case. Those things are there, but most are mundane objects. So we can't just brush that fact aside and pretend that doesn't exist and hype up every single possible UFO is something anomalous, because that just muddies the water and we don't get anywhere.
Great points. And, this is where that gets fun. So it's great to debunk. It's great to analyze.
That's most of what UFO research is.
Exactly. And that's most of what science is. You debunk your own work. And I really respect the stance of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies on a case of theirs that Arrow debunked. So the Aguadilla video, Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. I guess I don't have a picture of it here, but it was, you might have seen the video. They did cover it in the PBS special. What was interesting is in the PBS special, Sean Kirkpatrick said he thought it was birds. But just prior to that airing of that show, Arrow had released their analysis and they said it was balloons. My argument is it can't be both. And if you look at the video, it doesn't really look like either. And so the SCU, who's the group who did kind of the original analysis and of that video, they came out with a response just a couple days ago, just yesterday, where they said, great, thank you for looking at it, but we have some questions. You said you saw this, and you said you used this data point or that data point, but you're not showing your work. You're not saying how you came to those conclusions in your paper. Could you please do that? So we can look at this further, because they have some good points. I mean, if they're saying, like they say, it clearly moved behind an electrical tower, and so it had to be close to the ground. Well, if that's true, then we can figure out distance. And if there's distance and it's moving, maybe that doesn't fit your theory. So, this is the way it's done. It's a back and forth process where all parties work together.
Yeah, I love that. Science.
Science. So I just wanted to announce that, SC has asked that question. This is the way that it's done. Great job with them. But next, so this is some interesting news coming from Canada. And it's funny because all this news gets lost in all the craziness. And I told my listeners, I'm not going to be covering a lot of the hearsay and the tabloid stories, even though there's a big hearsay tabloid story we'll be getting into, but it's such big news that I think we've got to touch on it. So, and we'll probably more than touch on it. But I think, for both of us, there'll be a lot of examples on how it's should not be done. But one of the big pieces of news is Canada. So Canada was inspired by the US government looking into UFOs. So they have created this project called the Sky Canada Project. Where they're reviewing their own records. They say, we're getting 500 to 1,000 UFO sighting reports. And they just announced that they will have that report ready in July. And, here's one of their statements. It's not meant to prove or deny the existence of extraterrestrial life or extraterrestrial visitors. Just much like the United States reports. Even though they led with, we don't have enough data to prove either way. I'm sure that's what the Canadians are saying because we don't. But at least it'll give more insight and give us a better idea of what data they have collected.
Yeah, this is a good reminder to people that UFOs aren't just limited to the United States. Countries all around the world have and do investigate UFOs. Governments, we're talking, and have and do release official government files on UFOs. And Canada's got a wealth of UFO information, and they've released reports before, so it's great to see this one coming out as well.
And I do want to take a second to kind of bash on the media a little bit, in that this whole idea of why are UFOs only seen in America? It's really frustrating because you see some of the larger outlets saying that, whereas UFO researchers aren't saying that. Nobody's saying that. You're just pulling this out of nowhere. What are your thoughts on why they say that? And what's going on?
I mean, yeah, that's always been a bizarre assumption to me, a very, American-centric thought for people here in our home country. And I don't know, maybe other countries have similar thoughts. You think that your viewpoint is kind of the center of your reality, and things go from there. But I will say I have to fault a little some of the leading talking heads on this subject in the media, because even people like Lou Elizondo, in many interviews and talking points, kind of insinuated that, we just realized that this isn't just a UFO or a US phenomenon, and we're now just starting to talk to other countries about this serious issue, making it seem like they're just bridging the gap. They're just starting these conversations. We're starting to realize that, this is more than just a US issue, when that is not the case, and that has never been the case.
Right. I mean, we've been covering throughout Open Minds. You can find articles, especially with the French covering it, with a lot of stories on Chile. In fact, Leslie Kane, who wrote that original New York Times story in 2017, has been covering a lot of the Chile news. I do a lecture on it, but of course, Antonio Huneeus had worked with a lot of South American countries that had official groups. So yeah, like you said, it's never been purely American.
And here's the thing too, it also, there's a learning curve you go through when you dive into the topic of UFOs, right? If this isn't something you've actively been researching, it's not something you're familiar with, it's not something you've spent years of your life doing, when you get into the topic, all of this is new, and you start discovering every little aspect of UFOs as something new. So if you're a young journalist or a young hobbyist getting into this, and you've got a blog or some social media presence, and you all of a sudden discover there was something called the Cometa report, or some of these other things, wow, the US isn't the only place that has UFOs. It's all new, and you report it out as new, and it's like this big discovery when that's been the case all along. So
right.
It happens a lot with this topic, and again, with any topic. You're not going to instantly know everything about UFOs, and I think that spawns a lot of, the UFO conspiracies that come out because people discover things they're not familiar with. It's outside their life experience, and therefore it's new, it's secret, it must be a cover-up, and it kind of takes on a life of its own from there.
Right. And you mentioned the Cometa report. For anybody who doesn't know, that was a report written by some French engineers and very credible people, former government people, where they felt that there was something definitely going on with UAP. And this is interesting. I just wanted to pull this up, but this is what we've got with Enigma so far. So when we started the app, late 2013, we've already got like 1,670 sightings so far in Canada. And then out of historical reports from other databases, over nearly 15,000. So yeah, a lot of sightings in Canada. And actually, if I back up, you can see the UK with 13,000, Australia 5,000. So yeah, there's sightings all around the world. All right, so getting into some of the whistleblowers and hearsay type of stuff. This is kind of wild. So there was supposed to be a skiff meeting with Lou Elizondo, who you mentioned, that intelligence guy who kind of broke all this open. David Grusch, who spoke in a congressional hearing claiming stuff about aliens and all of this stuff. But David Grusch keeps shirking media and attention despite his claims and what he's and saying that he's going to participate in these things. So there was supposed to be this skiff meeting. They had to cancel. And Representative Luna, who's kind of the head of this, said Grusch couldn't make it. Lou Elizondo said there was some kind of budgetary issue. So, but I just, I'd love to hear your perspective. I don't buy that Grusch couldn't afford an airplane ticket. What's really weird about this also is he's supposed to be a staffer on this committee now, and he can't make it to one of his own committee's meetings that is centered around him and his claims.
Yeah, the red flags keep piling up. I mean, we can go down that rabbit hole, but I have not shied away from my personal feelings about David Grusch and his lack of credibility or ability or willingness to substantiate his claims. He's happy to make claims all day long, but when given the opportunities to substantiate these claims, there's always an excuse why that can't happen.
Exactly.
And so the more this happens, the worse it looks.
Exactly. And you brought up the right word, credibility. It would be one thing if this was the first time. Maybe he got sick or something, but it's not. And John Greenewald has been on X making a big point of that because these are really good points. He points out in October 23 that Grusch was supposed to meet with Senator Gillibrand in a skiff. Right. And then he said he would not or could not purchase a plane ticket to fly to Washington, D.C. If I had money at the time, not this moment, but maybe a few weeks ago or a couple months ago, I would have been willing to have some spare money to pay for that ticket. But I think that our listeners, even our skeptical listeners, would pay money to help him get there, let alone people are bringing up these disclosure nonprofits that are collecting money. They can't buy him a plane ticket.
Yeah.
What? So there's that.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. And, also with Arrow, he was supposed to meet with Arrow and he left them high and dry.
Exactly. Another one
bailed on that meeting. So it's got a history of this, and it's piling up and, becoming, kind of known that this is how he operates. It's not a good look.
Right. So, yep. And you just mentioned the Arrow meeting, which John Greenewald brought up, and just has some records here because we like to provide receipts, actual evidence for the stuff that we're alleging or talking about. And then further, for me, this was also a big hit on his credibility when he said in front of Congress that Arrow had never reached out to him when there were a lot of records that show they did reach out to him, and he had excuse after excuse. not to meet with them. Um, it's just really wild, and it kind of harkens back to the whole point of um, what frustrates me with a lot of the coverage and a lot of the community is like this assumption that he is credible or what he's saying is accurate when we don't have any reason. There's no, and these, like you said, things be piling up that undermine his credibility. Really, as someone who's writing about this, we should have a concern and be skeptical,
Right.
and those concerns are piling up. And just one more thing, I think that what has happened, and from the media people and very credible people I've talked to, and we've seen some very high profile people kind of talk about this, and that they were really excited with the Elizondo revelations, and then Grusch came out, and they were really excited and 100% on board. But when nothing came of that, they all were extremely disappointed. They felt duped. They expressed their concern and then left UAP and talking about UAP.
Yeah. And look, this isn't new. This happens all the time in this field, and it always needs repeating. But UFO history is cyclical. Things that have happened in the past with UFOs will certainly happen again. And we've seen it time and time again where seemingly credible, important sounding people make incredible claims and people blindly believe it absolutely 100% simply because this is an important sounding person or they've got an impressive title. And, we saw that with Paul Hellyer and other, government officials where they blindly take on faith. And I would put Harry Reid in this category too. They blindly take on faith what somebody tells them because they know that person and they trust that person. That's wonderful. And that works well for you, but that does nothing for proof. And humans are humans. Again, I come back to this point a lot, but humans are pretty awful. But even if we try to be nice to humans, humans are incredibly fallible. And it doesn't matter who you are, what your title is, or your important sounding position, you can still be taken in by things that you misunderstand or misinterpret. And most of what we're hearing these days that people get excited and hyped up about with UFOs and possible, government ties and proof of a government cover-up, it's still based on people seeing things that they're piecing together and reading between the lines and making huge assumptions and then, making a big deal about, and everybody's eating it up because, again, the source comes from an important sounding person or a government official with an important sounding title. That means nothing. It really means nothing.
It doesn't. And, you and I have a little more experience because we covered a lot of these people who would come forward and then turn out to be BS. You mentioned
we had
Paul
people
Hellyer.
like this in our office almost every day.
Yeah.
Colonels and generals and, high-ranking government officials in our office telling us the most incredible things.
And at first you're like, wow. And then after a while,
You eat
when
it
you
up.
just hear the
Absolutely.
same BS, you're just rolling your eyes like, oh no, this guy's falling for BS too. You mentioned Paul Hellyer, former defense minister for Canada, which is very similar to Tim Gallaudet, an admiral with the Navy. Both of them
100%.
saying, when we were working in our official capacities, we never ran across anything that was UFOs.
Right.
But now that we're looking at this stuff, we find it very credible. They have nothing to say. They're just a bunch of fanboys like anybody else.
Say, and they cite to, just like Tim Burchett and others, they point to the literature.
Right.
They point to the literature. Read the UFO books, and you'll see that this aligns with all of the stuff you read in UFO books.
Mm-hmm.
That's your proof, folks. That's your proof.
It's funny because I used to make fun of Steve Bassett, who's now working with the Hollywood Disclosure Project or something like that, and he's been the guy to always say, "Oh, disclosure's around this corner every year." But when you'd ask him, "Where's your evidence?" he'd say, "Just go to the internet," and that's what these guys are doing, and it's really frustrating because it's like we don't want to it, and it's. I feel really irresponsible of all of these guys in official capacities because they're using their weight and their credibility to bring credibility to things that they don't know are real, that are hearsay. And what's frustrating is you and I can say this because we don't even do this. When we write about these things, we say, here's what we know, here's the information out there. I don't know if it's real or not. Even if we feel it's real and we're like all excited, we're being honest and responsible by saying, here's the facts, here's the situation, we've got to wait and see.
Yeah,
If we
and
can
that's
do it,
the
they can
only
do it.
way you can play it. Really, because it's
Mhm.
totally irresponsible. That's a great word. It is irresponsible. And knowing this is a delicate topic. It really is. People are hungry for answers. They are. That's why religion is so popular. People gravitate to where they can get answers. Religion provides that for people. And UFOs goes down the religion line because people hungry, desperate for those answers, find plenty of people within the UFO community very happy to give those answers.
Right.
And this field is filled with no shortage of shady people who are happy to provide those answers because it gives them a following, because it provides them an income. And, they apparently have no moral qualms about that. It's
Right.
horribly irresponsible. And people we've seen this from the inside. It is really heartbreaking seeing how desperate people are for these answers about UFOs. They spend all of their money they don't have, paying people to give them answers. And, we've seen so many shady people just, and these shady people giving these answers are laughing at these people behind their backs. We've heard
Yeah.
them behind stages just making fun of the audience that paid to see them, that pay for their livelihoods. It's heartbreaking. It's disgusting. And, again, that's why I think, especially with a topic like UFOs, where you have people desperate for answers, just hanging, waiting for anybody to give them those answers, it puts more of an onus on us to be that extra, especially responsible, careful with this information, and not claiming that we have answers. We can provide the information, and that's all we can do. I mean, pretending that we know
Yeah.
we can give people definitive answers is grossly irresponsible and disgusting.
Yeah, I want to take a minute to actually call someone out. And there's only one name I can think of, and that where we've talked about before, because we were really close with this individual and it was kind of funny. And I would say I have a little bit of affection for this person, and it's a showman. It's Jaime Musan. We helped videotape and stream a conference of his. Every time he would come to town, we would hang out with him. Our boss at Open Minds bought one of his squirrel monkeys that was a fake alien. He's still doing that. It's so funny
And our
because
boss brought Jaime to my wedding. So yeah.
Right, your boss brought Jaime Musa to your
Jaime
wedding.
and Danny Sheehan. He just randomly showed up with them at my wedding.
That's right. You had Jaime Musan and Danny Sheehan. Oh my gosh, at your wedding, uninvited,
Mhm.
just showing up.
Right?
But I think
Stealing my booze.
and Jaime is one of those people who would laugh behind the scenes. It would kind of begrudgingly because it was his staff who would laugh and be
Sure.
like, making fun of people and stuff. And you could tell normally Jaime is joking around and he's trying to play it straight in front of us. But he was one of those guys that and it's so funny because I found myself on Telemundo. They asked me about Jaime, and so Jaime, of course, took an opportunity and had this back and forth videos, even though I didn't talk to him. They just took my interview and he disputed what I had to say. But he has been doing this forever and he just doesn't care about the truth. We know for a fact there were a lot of times where he knew the truth, but depending on the audience, he would give different versions of what's going on.
And this is a good example of how things in the UFO topic and the UFO field are cyclical, right? Because it's the unfortunate one of the unfortunate things about this field is that it doesn't matter how bad you're shamed, just wait a little while and then you can do the same things over and over again, right? If you're publicly exposed for pushing fake aliens, just wait a couple of years and then come out with more alien bodies and do the same thing all over again.
Mm-hmm. And I've got to say, moving on to our next story, because I wanted to bring out Jaime because he's a perfect example of that. But the thing is with Jaime, I guess to wrap this up, is that he sees himself as a showman. entertaining people, and kind of like the
He's a huge
tabloids do.
celebrity, and I wanna
Right.
back up and let people know that. And I have, no ill will against Jaime. Jaime is a sweetheart. He's always been wonderful to me. He was a friend, you know? So, but getting to spend time with him in Mexico City, that really lets you know how revered he is in Mexico
Yeah.
City and what a major celebrity he is. I mean, I was in the car going down the street, and people would come up and pound on the windows because they could see he was in the car, and they would want his autograph, right? They would see him going down the street, and that's the kind of draw he has. You'd go to a restaurant, everybody would swarm him at the restaurant and want his autograph. I mean, he fills auditoriums in Mexico City when he does presentations there. He is a massive celebrity.
Right, right. Yeah, so it's this showman aspect of it. And I think even it's almost like WWF where some of the audience even appreciate that about him. And for them it's a game. It's not like us where we're researching and looking for the truth. And even when I've said stuff against him where I'm like, I doubt this or I don't believe this, or even told the truth, like he knows this is wrong, but he's saying it anyway, he doesn't care. He'll still be like, "Can I interview you and let's debate?" And he doesn't mind that. It's all part of the show.
There are lots of showmen in this field, unfortunately.
Well, another showman, and I will come out and say I believe he is a showman, is Jeremy Corbell, because there have been, and we'll go over this because this is the next story. There have been several times where I've brought to him the fact regarding something he has covered, or he's called me and said, I need information on this. What's the deal? And I'm like, well, this is BS. Here's the truth. And he's like, and he just covers it anyway. So he's done just like Jaime, the same thing where he covers stuff regardless of whether it's true or not. He just said, and we'll show examples of that. But I could go through those just real quick. Like Richard Doty, who's a liar. He wanted to bring him to the Area 51 festival, where he asked me to speak. I told him, well, then I'm not going to go to speak there. And so he got upset, but he's like, fine. Doty doesn't even show up. Doty, but neither did anybody else to see this show. So it was no big deal. But that was one of them. There's this other guy, the Nano Man, he was covering, that stole the story of this psychic alien experience that he had from this person that he went and researched, that Nancy Talbot was researching in Denmark. And I told, and there's plenty of evidence of this because Nancy had been writing about this guy, and this guy went out there and then totally stole his story. He didn't
Right.
care. He still pushed this guy. And then the guy that we called Mr. Nanotubes, the guy who was examining the alleged, alien material and some material that our boss had him examine. And we called him Nano Man or Mr. Nanotubes because everything examined was alien nanotubes.
Alien
And it
nanotubes.
wasn't.
Yeah.
But Jeremy, again, he includes him in his documentary and everything, despite all of this that I gave him. So it's kind of frustrating. Now, I don't believe that of George Knapp. I think his heart's in the right place, but still,
It's
I would
always
say,
hard. It's always hard to tell with people because again, we're
yeah,
all different, but people get very emotionally involved with this topic too. And as we see with a lot of the whistleblowers who come out, it's hard to tell. And it's certainly not the blanket, same situation with everybody. But I do believe that a lot of these people genuinely believe what they're saying, right? They've seen what they've seen, and in their mind, they pieced it together and they figured it all out. And you're not going to convince them otherwise. They know the truth, and they're going to tell everybody, what they believe because that's what they believe to be the truth. And people get very passionately, emotionally wrapped up in this. And Jeremy is somebody with a very strong personality. And I'm not saying this is what's happening with Jeremy, but I know there are people who get so emotionally wrapped up in this that they're full of fire, full of passion, and they need to expose the cover up, and they're on a mission, and nothing's going to stop them. And if you get in their way, you're the enemy, and what you have to say, you're just trying to obstruct the truth from getting out, or whatever the case may be. But some people get so laser focused on what they've put together in their mind is the truth, that they've put all the puzzle pieces together, that everybody else has it wrong. Only they have it right. And get out of my way because I'm on a mission.
I kind of blame you for Jeremy Corbell, because when he came to the scene, it was that Silver Surfer
Silver
UFO that
Surfer, yeah.
turned out to be the Red Bull parachute team. But that just got the bug in him, because he was in the news all over the place. You were writing about it and helping bringing attention to that story, and then he took off from there.
There were so many people we interviewed over the years that
Yeah.
I guess we're responsible for putting in the limelight. But I'm to blame for a lot of things over the years, I think, because I've also been very honest, and I've even said on multiple interviews that the UFO topic is one of those topics where it's very easy to become a celebrity very quickly.
Yeah.
And when I've
Yeah.
said that, I always say, I know this is probably a bad thing and it's going to cause people to, take advantage of this. And, I'm going to be responsible for this. But it really is, because, again, it comes back to the fact that there are so many people desperate and hungry for answers. If you, are an unscrupulous individual with no morals and, are happy misleading people, it's so easy to do in this field and get a massive following.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want to necessarily, I don't know Jeremy's motives completely, but I guess what I would say, and this is where I think George Knapp should know better, is the way they report things is completely wrong. And it's not the way we would do it. And what I mean by that, because it's turned on them. So we can go over UFO video and leak one after another that gets debunked almost immediately when they put it out, such as the video of the pyramid UFOs, which was obviously some sort of lens thing, because every light in the sky was triangle shaped. At least Travis Taylor, who was defending that, had to say, okay, there's obvious a lens effect. That one, some others that we're going to talk about as we move on here, but several of these videos that get quickly debunked, where they come out and these are real, these are UFOs, these are aliens. And it's like, we don't know that. That's not how this works. Just because you're discovering something, that's when something needs to be researched and investigated. If there's
And look,
fire, you can't
yeah,
immediately jump to that conclusion.
I agree with that, and I will call this out here. This is where it gets into the realm of being irresponsible. It doesn't do anybody any favors when you throw out, just kind of a flippant, "Yeah, we're not saying it's aliens," but at the same time, everything you're saying is saying this is exotic, this is a cover up, this is obviously non-human intelligence, right? You can't have it both ways. And painting it as, hey, we're just presenting the facts and asking questions. No, that's usually not what's happening. You're painting a narrative, you're pushing things into a corner and presenting things as anomalous, when in fact all you have is some random person gave you something, and because of mysterious circumstances or something that seemed bizarre to them, and because it was a military source, you're thinking this is non-human intelligence, and that's how you're pushing it to the world and sounding the alarm and going on the news and making it into a big deal when it doesn't need to be, because you don't know what it is. And you don't really know the source of the video. You don't know all the details. You're operating with very limited details. You can't make these huge jumps. You can't sound the alarm. You can't excite people under the guise of, oh, we're just trying to find answers. It doesn't
And
work like that. So.
it's irresponsible. Lou Elizondo did this recently, and it undermines your credibility when,
Right.
he showed these UFO videos at a conference. It got leaked that he showed these pictures, and they were immediately debunked. They were old hoaxes or misidentifications. And he's like, oops, you can't just oops that when you're using this to justify that there's an alien cover-up.
And again, I mean, I give people leeway, not having the sort of institutional knowledge or the legacy knowledge that people like you and I would have, having been in this for so many years and having seen so much and researched so much. Everybody's not going to have all of this information immediately. That being said, that should be understood. And again, as a responsible person communicating about this and really wanting to get to the bottom of it, or pretending that you're trying to educate people or get people interested in the topic, you have to be responsible. You have to lead with those remarks like, well, here's something, don't know what this is. Here are the circumstances, kind of strange things here, strange things there. Don't know what that is, but we'll continue looking into it. But that's an example of some of the strange things we're seeing, right? You can't have your definitive answers and push things on people when you yourself have no idea.
Right. And so we're starting to run short on time, but there's so much to talk about. But this is one of those instances. The new whistleblower from Jeremy and George and their weaponized show. And what is difficult about this is that if you watch it, again, this whistleblower is saying, especially at the majority of this interview, first of all, is about his perceptions about things.
Right.
And it's just that, his perceptions. Then he gets into, oh, you couldn't mention this name or that name or you get fired. And they ask, well, was that, but that wasn't something that was mandated. He's like, oh no, that wasn't anything that came down. But I heard stories and people said they heard stories. So it's like rumor. Again, it's just
the same
rumor.
thing about mentioning the name of Immaculate Constellation.
Right.
And this has so many similarities to Luis Elizondo too. This guy stumbled upon this while he was doing volunteer work. It wasn't part of his regular job. Just lots of things of people coming across things that's outside of their scope, outside of their knowledge, with limited information.
Exactly.
And in this interview, he even says that things weren't spelled out in this document, that he had to put things together on his own and sort of interpret what it was saying.
And that this level of classification that this information had, it was in a place that it shouldn't have been, he said. Well, they're probably getting egg on their face because now it's starting to look like that they were wrong, that this wasn't what he thinks it was. First of all, one of the things he said was that Sean Kirkpatrick was aware of legacy UFO programs. Sean Kirkpatrick, Stephen Greenstreet interviewed him, and Kirkpatrick says, no, that's BS. And I don't believe that whatsoever. But if you look at here, David Grusch, one of the things he worked on was the Shriver war game. And the big
so the file that this guy went through and came across was labeled as part of this war game. So right away, that should be a red flag and let people know, well, maybe it was supposed to be, everything in this file was part of a war game.
Exactly. And then this guy in this Reddit.
David Grusch was part of that war game. Yeah. So an advisor on that.
Exactly. Grusch was an advisor on it. And this guy is really great. He's just like, hey, guys, I think they made an honest mistake. The 2018 Shriver war game is not a big deal. They do this war game scenario every year.
They look at future risks. They're looking at combat in space and adversaries, in space. So this is all very in line with what those war games do.
And this was a war game that was an imaginary scenario that took place in 2028, the future.
Yeah. And the 2018 war games, the guy says that the photo, he mentions that he saw a photo of Russian submarines and a UFO above it or whatever. And he mentions that it was located in the Pacific at Kamchatka or something, the Kamchatka Peninsula, but that is in the North Pacific, where the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command was sort of in charge of one of these exercises that took place at those war games. So it's in the exact location where it should be for these people being involved. So that again ties into the war games mentioned on the first slide. So I don't know why one would assume that it's anything else.
And this guy, even at least in this interview, said he doesn't have any inside knowledge, that he got excited with the New York Times article and the Navy videos just like the rest of us, but he said he hadn't seen those on government servers and has no special
Right.
insight than what everybody else has seen. And this has
Right.
happened before in the news, even recently, as an example of people misinterpreting. Of course, you and I see this all the time, and we spend so much time correcting people. But this article that first actually was covered by Weekly World News, yep, the Bat Boy people, that the Russians shot down a UFO and it turned people into stone, and the CIA knew about it. The New York Post, among others, talk about CIA files detailing Soviet crash. But Scopes actually are doing an analysis with Snopes with an accurate headline. It doesn't prove aliens turned Soviets into stone, and it was never classified. It was simply a news clipping.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing about so many CIA and FBI UFO files people get excited about, but those UFO files are filled with just scans of newspaper clippings, of letters that UFO researchers wrote. They're not things that prove any sort of UFO, incident. They're just documenting UFO mentions, the mentions of the word UFO.
Exactly. I mean, I think people could say, well, why are they collecting news clippings on UFOs? That's a legit question.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
don't think,
And
I
you could
think,
say there were potential, certainly reasons for that during the Cold War, and that's when a lot of this stuff happened.
right.
But
Exactly. And not
Alejandro,
only that,
I will say something that might lend some credence to this story is those 2018 war games that took place. Guess where they were based out of?
Russia.
No, they were at the Air Force Warmongering Institute that's located at Maxwell Air Force Base's Curtis E. LeMay Center. Little
Oh,
MJ-12 throwback there.
yeah. So there, it always comes back to something,
That's right.
and that reminds me too of another frustrating thing in this interview. They invoke Bob Lazar. Oh, this is just like what happened to Bob Lazar.
Right.
Bob Lazar is the worst. What's really frustrating about the Bob Lazar story is that Jeremy and George Knapp, also the original person to cover Lazar, do not cover any of the dubious, or just like they're doing to this day, the dubious or items that undermine the credibility of both of these witnesses, or at least Lazar, which there are numerous ones. I mean, I've got an article coming out, but the biggest one for me is that he started these claims when he talked about aliens fighting at Area 51 and all of this crap only weeks after Richard Doty said this on this UFO live TV show for the first time that
Mm,
the public had ever heard. Oh, there's aliens at Area 51. And he's like, the aliens have taken over the base and all of this crazy
yeah.
BS. And then Lazar jumps in. Oh, yeah, I was there. Let alone his criminal background, none of which they cover, which seriously undermine his credibility. This lone witness who they take hook, line, and sinker that, proves that aliens were or are at Area 51.
Yeah. And back to our earlier point of just being irresponsible and the fallout from that. I really feel for this guy coming forward, making himself public with this immaculate constellation stuff, because I do feel that a lot of the rhetoric that has been pushed, a lot of the talking points in the narrative pushed by a lot of the leading voices in the UFO community now, have really made a lot of people, like this individual, clearly convinced that there's this grand cover up, that humanity
Yeah.
is being given a great disservice, that we're all being harmed by this government cover up and this technology being held under wraps, and that we have a right to know this information, and people are willing to risk their careers and their lives to come out and share this information with the public because we all have a right to know. Well, again, if you're going to do that, it'd be great to have, something solid, when a lot of this, again, even when you're trying to articulate it, is based on assumptions you've made, on things you pieced together with very limited information and out of context. Um, I
Well,
don't know what to say about that. That seems incredibly short-sighted and irresponsible. I don't know the guy, and I can't make, life choices for him. But also, this narrative, again, has been so highlighted and pushed in recent years with the big talking heads about how dangerous it is to talk about UFOs and how your life is in danger and how you give
So
up
silly.
everything if you talk about UFOs. And that is just the biggest load to me, because you and I know we've covered this over so many years. We've seen the people, high ranking government officials and military personnel, let
We've
alone
chased the
anybody else,
biggest stories. I
who
mean,
have
we've
made
chased all
this
of the most
seem so much bigger
sensitive
than any of
stories.
these people, and they've been just fine. They haven't been killed. All of the
Neither have
people
we.
who gets claimed, or claim that have been executed because of their UFO pursuits, we know
Mhm.
otherwise. There are other stories that are unfortunate and contributed to those deaths. But everybody is on edge now and thinks that this is such a delicate topic and you can't broach it. But again, back to just public reception and even coworkers, like everybody loves UFOs. Everybody is interested in this topic, and they always have been. And when you talk to people and let them know that you're serious about UFOs, the floodgates open and they want to tell you their own sightings, their own
Right.
stories. It's not ridicule. It's a lot of fear of possible ridicule that drives fear in people and keeps this such a mysterious kind of topic that we can't talk about. And if we do, we're going to be executed. Again, irresponsible to be pushing these narratives.
Yeah, very irresponsible. And a lot of that group, the intel groups or the people working, a lot of the people associated with that Soul conference, that's what they say and do. And I think it's extremely, extremely irresponsible. You know, there somebody argued, Travis Taylor argued with me, oh, there doesn't have to be extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims, but there has to be some evidence,
Yeah.
something, not zero. This is also, I think, really interesting because one of the people speculated on that Reddit that maybe they created that war scenario to screw with like Elizondo and Corbell, and they were just taking things from the media to say, oh, what if this scenario happened? It's very interesting. This is called Immaculate Constellation. This alleged program when Jeremy created a documentary about the ridiculous things that John Lear has to say. Why was Jeremy even highlighting? I felt so uncomfortable when he was doing this because we were really close with Jeremy at the time. But John Lear, who just makes up all these wild conspiracies. Anyway, it seems like it's being buried because the website's down and everything. But in 2016, Jeremy made this documentary, Immaculate Deception, full of wild alien claims, none of which were verified or true.
And I don't know. Here's another thing. Like, I don't know. I mean, especially knowing that, and again, this goes back to sort of institutional knowledge and knowing what's been done in UFO history before. But we know that people have been fed fake documents. That's a huge part of disinformation campaigns. For whatever reason, it's been done multiple times, and George and Jeremy certainly know that. They're good friends with Richard Doty, so it's very, very interesting in my mind. I don't know what's going on there, but again, because we've seen this happen before, because we know, and especially living in the age we live in now, this is a different world from when you and I were doing this at Open Minds. It is infinitely easier to fake everything: videos, images, documents. Like, it's all out. You can have all of the great
Right.
images and videos and whatever you want. It's all out. So I know that sounds incredibly just flippant and kind of morbid with this topic, just like give up, UFOs are done, there's nothing we can do. And honestly, that's kind of how UFOs are always going to be. When you're dealing with the unknown, that's the frustrating part of UFOs. We're not going to have definitive answers, but something we are guaranteed to have is a lot of BS and an endless supply of it.
Right. And I've that's why I've argued the science route is the only route, the NASA route, the doing the invoking citizen science and crowdsourcing to get the public involved and transparently investigating and doing science, which is our last two stories to cover very quickly. What really Arrow is doing, at least they're showing their work. And they released today two of their resolution reports or at least gave a little heads up for one and then released this one. This one I'm not as excited about. It's these volcano sightings that typically
Mm.
turn out to be, as you and I know, just lots of weird stuff is pushed out in volcanoes. Things look
Oh yeah,
weird.
we used to always report about Popocatépetl.
Yeah, good job. I've always been impressed in the way you've been able to say that. So there's this one, but even more to the point, there's yet another. This was one of Jeremy's leaks of what very quickly people identified as a balloon that is common to the local area during the holiday that was going on at the time. And sure enough, Arrow says that this was a balloon, a cluster of partially and fully inflated balloons that came from the local area. So they're going to release that. But this was yet another one where Jeremy comes out, look, proof of aliens. But no, very quickly it was debunked. That's not how you do it. You and I keep going back to this, but it's just the truth because we've got experience doing it. And that's what's so great about you and I talking right now. We wouldn't have released the story that way. We would have said, here's a new video. It looks pretty interesting, just like I do all the time when the next segment of my show is going to be about some of the cool sightings this week from Enigma, but not one of them will I say is real. In fact, I always tell the audience, I expect these videos that I put out that I think are weird to be debunked. But what I'm hoping is that there will be one that can't be debunked. And that's, I think, the angle that you have to have it at. Look, this is interesting. It needs more research. We don't know what it is. Not, look, proof of aliens. The government's hiding everything. Be careful who you show this video to, or you might get killed.
Yeah. And again, public education comes back to so much emphasis on public education because again, we all are different. We all have different life experiences. We've all seen and experienced different things in our lives. We all live in different parts of the world. There are different things in the sky in different parts of the world. There are new things being launched into the sky all the time. I mean, we see Starlink all the time. That's going to get worse, infinitely worse. Amazon is getting into that game. They just launched a bunch of satellites, and they're going to have thousands of satellites in the air doing the same thing as Starlink, providing internet to remote locations. So space is just absolutely littered. Our skies are absolutely littered. And it behooves us all to familiarize ourselves and for us as researchers to, in stories like that where you have something weird, we can lean on our experience and share that and say, look, this is bizarre. Here's the situation. Here are the details we have. This strongly resembles this object that we've seen many times before, and here's a video showing a similar thing, but we don't know at this point. That's a likely explanation, but other more exotic explanations are possibilities. You've got to be responsible with this stuff.
Right. And I do want to kind of finish this off with that's all the news I had to cover, a lot of stuff. But that kind of like we mentioned with Jaime before, just because we're critical of the way that people approach this, sometimes very concerned about the way that they approach it because it's irresponsible, quite frankly. In the past, we haven't had so many people who were former government officials kind of grouping together and doing this in irresponsible kind of
and steering a narrative. It's very concerning.
steering. But it doesn't mean that we hate these people, that we think they're evil. You and I have spent a lot of time with many of these people and do consider them friends, even though some of them don't 100%. Consider me friends anymore because I'm vocal about not agreeing with them, which is unfortunate because, I don't.
We all have our perspectives.
Exactly. And, you probably are the same. You have a lot of affection for many of those people still. I mean, George Knapp was a big mentor of mine.
And again, that's what another part of what makes UFOs so hard, right? And it's even more emotional for us, at this stage in our careers. And I'm glad you brought that up because we are this way, and we're talking this way now because we care so much about this topic, because we've invested so much time in this topic, because we want to see good research done, and we're really alarmed and disappointed in where this conversation has gone. It's really been yeah, it is just, it's frustrating to see. I don't like seeing people taken advantage of. I don't like seeing people given false hope and false narratives and told what to believe. This isn't a field where you can be told what to believe. Yes, belief drives a lot of UFOs, but belief is individual for all of us. We all have to individually weigh the evidence for ourselves and make our own conclusions.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. We used up that entire first hour and then a little more, but it was a lot of fun, and we were able to get through a lot of stuff. I mean, do you feel there's anything unsaid that you want to share? Maybe something you're working on or you want to talk to people about?
No, I don't think so, but we'll do this again soon. I mean, we can go on and on and on.
Exactly. And one of the things I want to do is not necessarily focus on having new guests, but having a lot of the guests like you that are high quality guests where we can analyze some of the
Why,
stuff
thank
and
you.
look at some of the stuff that's going on. Because I think that's what the audience wants. They're like, well, what am I supposed to make of all of this? And not to say listen to what we have to say and you've got to adhere to what we say, but at least it's a different perspective. And we're just sharing our insights from our years and years of doing this, much of that full time.
Don't listen to that show. Those are just the crabby old UFO guys bitching and moaning.
They're always complaining about something.
But something we might have to do is, when you get the start getting the magazines posted, we can maybe do some behind the scenes stories about some of those.
That would be a lot of fun. That's a
And
great
to go
idea.
through each, each issue and kind of talk about some of the stories related to
Mhm.
those.
Yeah, Karen's always telling me the stories and everything are so crazy that you guys ought to write about some of that. It's just I get hesitant sometimes because I don't necessarily want to embarrass people, but because there's a
Yeah,
lot.
that's right. And again, I mean, all these people are our friends. We have so much history with these people. I,
Yeah,
I do consider them friends. Um, but yeah,
a
I
big dysfunctional family almost.
dysfunctional family. There we go.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining.
My pleasure, Alejandro. Thank you.
It was great to talk UFOs with Jason again. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. But now let's move on to the Enigma sightings of the week. I look at videos literally every day to comb through and find the most interesting videos. And that's what we'll be looking at. To start with, let's look at one that has been really popular with users. All right, so let's take a look here. This is from Palermo, Italy, from Monreale or Monreale. So this person said that they saw these three silver triangular shapes. We only recently got this video. That's why I'm covering it now. However, they say this event took place on October 4th, 2024. So let's take a look here. And just for the listeners to tell you a little bit more about what we're looking at is you do see, this palm tree in the foreground. In the distance, then you see some hills. You see one hill, then another kind of larger hill, kind of cliff behind it that's more kind of in shadow. Over the hill, you see these three luminous lights, and it kind of looks like three objects that are over the hill. However, I think they're further back in the background and actually on that cliffside or on that mountain that's in the background. It's hard to say for sure. When I look at videos like this, often videos that have a hill or a mountain in the background, the objects typically turn out to be something that is on the hill in the background. Here, the hill is in shadow, potentially three shiny objects that are reflecting light that are not in shadow, so they look more stunning. But yeah, there's no movement in them, so that's what makes me think they're not floating. Now, the palm tree isn't moving either, so there's no wind. If they were balloons or something like that, that would be possible, but you would probably see at least some movement. But yeah, very interesting video. And this one's gotten a lot of attention with a lot of people discussing it on the app. So, really interesting video. Love to know what you think. Moving on from Palermo, Italy, let's take a look at the next video. This one is from Maryland, Columbia, Maryland. This was on April 15th of this year. So just a couple weeks ago at almost 9 p.m. Now, immediately, most of you are probably going to know what this is, but not everybody does, surprisingly. And that's why I wanted to show it, to make sure and educate people, but also because it's so stunning. It's such an amazing video, and we live in such weird times. So let me describe this for the listeners. What you see is someone on the side of the road, it looks like, because there's some street lamps, and it looks like maybe they even pulled over to get this video, which is great. I'm glad they did that. Hopefully, be safe if you do that. And they're filming up above in the sky, and you see multiple small dots of lights in a perfect row moving together. Just a bunch of them, like probably 50 or 60 of them. These, of course, are Starlink satellites. Some of them are closer to each other than others, but this kind of shows you what I've talked about before, where when the Starlink are launched, they can be really close to each other and kind of look like one object. So you'll see this almost looks like, there are objects in a long string. Some are closer than others. And when in a couple spots where they're really close, they almost look like one kind of longer object when they're not. These are multiple objects in a row. But look at that. And this is what a Starlink train looks like. Now, I haven't seen this. A lot of people have. Of course, a lot of people submit these to Enigma, so I've got a few of them. But this is one of my favorites and definitely one of the best we've gotten recently. But look how cool that is. Isn't that weird? But yeah, that is Starlink. And I just wanted to show that to the audience for those of you who haven't seen that before. For you listeners, look out for this. It's something that is fairly common. And a lot of people see these. I haven't yet, and I can't wait for my first time to see a Starlink train. This one is Enigma 312305. And remember, I put the links to all of these in the show notes so you can go look at these. Also, if you get the app, some of these are in that content feed, and what we call the content feed, but it's the good videos in the first tab. We usually don't put much Starlink in there unless they're really extraordinary. But moving on, this one is a little bit more mysterious, and I don't know what this one is. So this is small white dots moving quickly. This is in Rossendale, England. So this is in the United Kingdom. The explanation says the short 3-second video you have to watch in slow motion. It's just a flicker on normal speed. 40 to 50 drones were spotted. I don't see that many, all coming from the same direction, headed the same way. They moved from a hill around 2 miles away to the next town over in 5 to 8 seconds, somewhere under 100 meters high, some few hundred maybe. It's hard to tell. I have lots of videos filming for a while. So it's really interesting here. A couple things about it is, first of all, what the witnesses describe versus what's in the video. And I don't feel like the description fits very well. Still, this video is really interesting. We see essentially someone zooming in and out of these 3 white objects that are moving together. They are obviously, it looks like at their house. It almost looks like they're on a hill because they are at level with like the second story of the houses down the block. There's trees in the way, and you can see rooftops as they are filming these lights. And this video is only 37 seconds, so it's pretty quick. But it almost looks like a triangular object with 3 lights at the end of it kind of moving together. Now, this is a daytime sighting. The last one was a nighttime sighting. And this one's during the day. So you can see these 3 white objects, but you can't really see anything in between them. So you don't know that they're all together. In fact, I would imagine they're not, because you don't see a solid object between them. You just see these 3 dots. At first, they're kind of level. And then as it moves, they're not. What's weird about this is I don't think it's balloons, because these lights seem to be self-luminescent. They don't seem to be reflecting light. There are clouds in the background, so you can tell that these are under the clouds, although they disappear into the clouds. So that gives you kind of an idea of the height. The clouds are very thick that they go into. and they don't seem to slow down at all when they do move into these clouds. So to me, they don't move like balloons. Now, the witness assumed they were drones, which is kind of a weird assumption to make, I think. I don't know why they make that assumption. It could be three drones flying together. It's a possibility, each with their own light. I don't know about that, but this is a really interesting sighting. Now, I posted this one online and I got some responses. I said, "What do you guys think this is?" One person said Chinese balloons, has to be. And I understand why this user is saying that, because, they are self-luminescent, but Chinese balloons are usually orange because the lights that the skin of the object is usually an orangey color or red color, and then you've got a flickering light, which is also kind of a warm color that illuminates those lights. So usually it's kind of a warm color. These seem very, very white. So I don't know that these are Chinese lanterns, but yeah, really, really interesting video. The movement of the lights is just kind of strange. It does kind of move like it's one object, but you can see there's not an object in between them. It's clear daylight. So really weird, really great video. I like this one. I can't figure this one out, so I would love your suggestions and let me know. This is Enigma 312486. Again, you can find a link to these in the show notes, but a really strange video from England. I'm not sure what the heck that is. So those are my Enigma videos for the week. Let me know what you think they are. And if you are on the Enigma app and you've got some cases that you've looked at and you're like, what the heck is this? And you would like some more feedback, feel free to share that in the comments and we will take a look. Before I end the show, there is an update. So Jason and I filmed the interview portion of this show yesterday, and today there was a hearing in the House Oversight Committee dealing with UAP, and information came out of it. Now, a lot of the people we just talked about, who we had, we used the word irresponsible quite a bit, who were sharing information and videos before they had done some research, were in this panel. And unfortunately, they're back to their same old antics. Lou Elizondo held up a picture he said was this huge disc floating over the ground. And we'll take a look here. The group that had sponsored it, the UAP Disclosure Fund, they're obviously really excited. Oh my gosh, look at this big disc. And you can see the picture there. And at first glance, it does look like a shadow, but you know what? Now that I know what it is, I can't unsee it. And to me, it doesn't look like a disc or a shadow at all. And those of you in the Southwest kind of can have an idea. There's a picture of Lou showing this picture. Of course, the picture he shows is very, very, very fuzzy. So it looks more mysterious. But within an instant, people were very quickly able to figure out what it is. Here is a picture that Stephen Greenstreet posted that I think shows it more clearly. But they're irrigation circles. And, there's a lot of research going on out there now, even people taking the photo and looking at it from a different angle. And you can very clearly see that there is a road that is around this circle that is allegedly a shadow, obviously not a shadow. They're irrigation circles. So once again, they're trying to tell the public that, look at this evidence of aliens. Look at my amazing photo here. And the photo's quickly debunked. I don't know why they couldn't have done just the smallest iota of research and looking on Google Maps, which is how people figured it out. Look on Google Maps of the area, and they would have noticed there are dozens and dozens and dozens of these circles around. So, we'll talk more about all of this next time. However, I just wanted to give you guys this update before we move on. It's just gotten, I hate to use the term, but it's gotten silly. It really has. I if these guys are taking this field seriously, I think that they just need to be patient, do the research, and work with others. All of this is best when we work as a team, and even get the debunkers in. So you know what they're going to say before you post this stuff, or you can argue. And it's fair just to say that, hey, I got this to some skeptics. They think it's this. I disagree with them. I think it's that. And here's my argument. And let your argument and your data speak for itself. If it's strong enough, then, you will win the day, especially if you can get some other scientists and researchers on your side. But just to kind of put this stuff out there and then have it debunked just really undermines credibility. And again, think of what the people who were like, okay, I'm going to give these guys a shot and I'm going to hear what they have to say. And then this happens, it undermines the credibility of the whole field. And then a lot of people take it less seriously. So that's what we're trying to say. And it's not like we're trying to say we don't want to play a role. We would love to help out. Jason and I have been doing this for a long time, and we're always open to these guys and working with these guys, and they know that. So, but to be honest, who are we? We don't have any credentials as far as being scientists. So, that's who they should probably employ to do some of this work. But at the very least, the credentials Jason and I do have is that we did this full time for many, many, many years. But anyway, thank you so much for listening. Thank you very much to Den of Geek, who is sponsoring the show. And hopefully some of you are new listeners from Den of Geek. If you are and you want to discuss more and you want to have more direct contact with me, I do have a Patreon. Now, it is, you do have to pay to get onto my Patreon, but as low as $1 a month, which is the lowest that I can put. And the reason that I put it that low is I just want serious people. I don't want trolls to come in and get all upset that, I am denying that aliens are here, whatever. We can save that kind of conversation for social media. I want a safe space that is troll-free where we can all kind of work and discuss together more constructively. So if you would like to, come join my Patreon. I also put a lot more stuff on the other things that I'm into, such as travel. I'm actually customizing a camper van that I'm building right now, and I'm sharing information about that. So I'm sharing all kinds of stuff on there. So, I would love to have you in there to be able to see the content there and then to discuss your interests and our shared interests. So just a place for us to have some fun. Thank you all so much for listening. Until next time, adios, muchachos.